Hello, friends. Tonight, I will share with you 3 terrifying stories. And if you think these are just made up, you are deeply mistaken. Every story on this channel is connected in one way or another to people who told them to me. I tell them in the first person. So sit back, turn off the lights, and listen carefully. Here's a story I never thought I'd have to tell out loud. The kind that kept me awake for weeks afterward, long after my shift ended, and the school should have been just another silent building. I worked nights as a guard at a public high school in the Midwest, a job I took because I thought it would be simple. Walk the halls, check the locks, keep a log. The district called it Overnight Facilities Monitor, but it was really me, a ring of master keys, and a building that seemed to breathe differently when everyone else was gone. On my first solo shift, the custodians wheeled their buckets out. The last teacher shut the doors, and I was left with a building full of darkened classrooms and the faint smell of floor wax and dust. My supervisor, Manny, told me the school made its own kind of noise at night. Boiler thuds, pipes clicking, the occasional power surge that might ring a bell by mistake. "Don't let it get to you," he said. Easy advice, harder to follow. The halls felt longer than they should have when I walked them. My flashlight beam cut across lockers that glinted like teeth. Trophy cases that caught the light for a second before swallowing it again. The cafeteria tables were folded up against the wall like sleeping animals. In the gym, the banners drooped above a floor that squeaked under my boots even though no one was playing. At first, it was routine. Check each door, shine the light into classrooms, log the time. But after midnight, the building started to notice me back. That's how it felt. At 12:27, a bell rang. Just one sharp metallic strike. Not a full passing period, not even 2 notes, just one. I froze because bells are deliberate, and this one had no reason. I wrote it down in the log to prove it happened, though the silence afterward tried to erase it. At 12:44, the motion sensor in A-Wing tripped. When I checked the cameras, nothing moved. Still, I walked down there. Near the art room, I found a trail of chalk dust, blue and pink, dragged along the baseboard and disappearing around the corner. I knelt down, touched it, and came away with powder on my fingers. The fluorescence overhead hummed louder, flickered once, and steadied. I told myself it was left over from the day, but my footsteps started to echo wrong, like someone was walking just behind me, slightly out of time. By the time I reached the stairwell, the hair on my arms was up. I found nothing, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. Back at the office, I barely had time to write a note when the intercom crackled. Not a voice, not at first, just static, a sharp inhale and exhale. Then the library light blinked on and off. I picked up the handset and held it. Nothing, just a silence that pressed against my ear harder than noise. I put it down, telling myself wires short out, machines glitch. A few minutes later,
The stairwell camera froze, then showed something that shouldn't have been there. A figure, small, hood up, hands in the front pocket, standing perfectly still on the landing. One frame they weren't there, the next they were. When I blinked, the feed was empty again. I rewound. Same thing. A jump cut in real life. I felt my stomach drop, like gravity wasn't certain anymore. I walked the stairwell anyway. Halfway up, I found a hall pass on the floor. Room 217, scrawled in marker. The plastic was warm in my hand, like someone had just let go. I should have called Manny, but I didn't. I kept walking. The library glass wall showed me the whole room before I even opened the door. Books in rows, the empty aquarium, the big table under the skylight. Inside, I saw footprints, chalk-dusted shoe prints, leading across the carpet and stopping dead in the middle of the room. Not faded, stopped, like someone stepped into thin air and vanished. The intercom hissed again. Then a voice came through, young and careful, like a student reading an announcement. "Good morning, students. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance." My skin went cold. It wasn't morning. It wasn't even the right day of the week. The voice listed off lunch options, stumbled, and faded out like a broken tape recorder. I whispered, "I'm here," without meaning to, and the silence that followed was heavier than any sound. A chair scraped faintly behind me, though every chair was stacked against the wall. I left the library fast. The hall didn't look right when I came out. Past room 221, there should have been a cross hall and lockers, but instead there were 3 more doors, 223, 225, 227. The numbering was neat, the same plaques as every other room. I knew they didn't exist. I put my hand on 223. The knob was warm. Inside was a classroom that belonged in another decade. Green chalkboard, rows of old desks, a rolling TV cart with a VCR. Sunlight spilled across the floor from a window that shouldn't exist, dust motes turning in it like tiny dancers. I shut the door and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. When I opened my eyes, the corridor was still wrong. I took the stairwell down because basements are supposed to be honest. The concrete and pipes down there at least looked like reality. My radio hissed, then Manny's voice asked, "You good?" Relief washed over me until I realized the fuzz in his tone didn't sound like static, it sounded like distance. Before I could answer, the voice shifted. Someone breathed my name into the speaker. Not Manny, not anyone I wanted to hear. I gripped the radio, forced myself to respond, but all I got was silence. Back upstairs, the main office intercom lit red again. This time the voice said, "We begin with attendance." Then it started calling names. Not mine at first, but names spoken in alphabetical order like a roll call. I don't know why I did it, but I said, "Present." My own voice sounded small in the office. The intercom stopped immediately, as if it had been waiting for me to participate. Then, down the hall, a door clicked shut all by itself. I felt like I'd been drafted into something I didn't understand. I went to the front doors, desperate for the solid fact of cold glass and steel. I pushed on the crash bar, locked. My breath fogged to pain. A second fog print appeared beside it, slightly higher, as if someone taller was breathing with me. My reflection in the glass was mine, but in the corner of my eye, the shape shifted just enough that I knew it wasn't. I couldn't make myself look directly. I stayed there until the intercom spoke one last time, the same young voice whispering, "Don't leave, you'll miss your name." The red light blinked once, and the whole building seemed to inhale. I walked backwards until I reached the office, picked up the logbook, and wrote one word: leaving. Then I unlocked the doors manually, even though the magnets resisted longer than they should have. Outside, the snow was melted into dirty streaks, the night air sharp and clean. But when I turned back, every light in A-Wing flicked on at once, as if 100 classrooms were suddenly alive. I didn't wait to see if they'd flick off again. I never worked another shift after that. Manny laughed when I turned in the keys, but he didn't ask why. Maybe he already knew. Sometimes when I drive past the school at night, I see a red light blink in the office window, and I swear I can hear a voice calling names, waiting for mine to be said again.
Here's another one that I still struggle to tell without feeling my skin crawl. It started in the house I grew up in, a split level with old wood floors and a basement that smelled like damp stone no matter how many times my dad ran the dehumidifier. I was in my early 20s, back home after dropping out of college for a semester, trying to save money and figure things out. I worked late shifts at a grocery store, so I was used to being awake at hours when the rest of the house was quiet. It was around 2 in the morning when I first heard it, someone calling my name from the basement. At first, I thought it was my imagination. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, half watching a rerun on TV and half asleep when I heard it. Faint but distinct. My name drawn out slowly, like someone testing their breath. I froze with the remote in my hand. My parents were asleep upstairs. My sister had moved out years before. No one should have been down there. The sound came again, rising through the heating vent like a sigh. My name. It was familiar but wrong, stretched in a way no human voice should stretch. I turned off the TV and sat in the dark, my own heartbeat suddenly louder than anything else in the room. The basement door was at the end of the hallway, just a plain white door with a brass knob. It was closed but not locked. I stared at it, waiting for a shadow to appear underneath. I told myself it had to be the pipes, the old furnace, maybe a neighbor's voice carrying strangely through the ducts. But when I leaned forward, I realized the voice wasn't muffled like a distant sound. It was close, as if the speaker was standing just beneath the floorboards. I grabbed the flashlight we kept in the kitchen drawer and made myself walk to the door. My hand shook when I turned the knob. The stairs down were narrow, steep, with the light switch halfway down the wall. I clicked it, and the single bulb at the bottom flickered on, throwing a yellow cone over the concrete floor. The voice stopped. The basement looked exactly as it always did. Laundry machines on one side, shelves of canned food and boxes on the other. Nothing moved. I stepped down slowly, my flashlight beam cutting across the corners, into the dark space under the stairs. Empty. I even opened the storage closet where the water heater rumbled faintly. No one.
I stood there until I convinced myself I was hearing things, then went back up and shut the door behind me. But my skin didn't stop crawling. The next night it happened again. Same time, same voice. This time it didn't just say my name, it whispered, "Come down," clear enough that I dropped the glass of water I was holding. I didn't go near the basement door that night. I turned the TV up louder, but the sound carried through anyway, weaving between the canned laughter of the sitcom until I couldn't ignore it. I barely slept. By the third night, I decided I had to prove to myself it was nothing. I set my phone to record, propped it on the counter near the basement door, and waited. At 2:04, right on cue, the voice rose up through the vent. My name, stretched like it was being pulled apart. Then, "Come down." The recording caught it. I played it back 3 times with my hands shaking. On the 4th playback, though, something else came through. Faint breathing between the words, as if someone had been standing right there next to the phone. I wanted to tell my parents, but what would I say? That the basement was haunted? That someone was living down there, unseen? They would have laughed or told me I was overtired. So I kept it to myself. I started avoiding the house at night, staying late at work or driving around until morning. But one night exhaustion won. I fell asleep on the couch, the basement door just down the hall. At 2:12, the voice woke me. My name, sharper this time. Then more urgently, "I'm waiting." The bulb at the bottom of the basement stairs flicked on by itself, light leaking through the crack under the door. I sat up, heart hammering, staring as the shadows shifted across the hallway. Then the light went off. Darkness again. I grabbed the keys to my car and left the house without even putting on shoes. I sat in the driveway with the engine running until the sun came up. The strangest part came a week later, when I finally confessed to Manny, one of the older guys at work. He'd lived in the same town his whole life. When I told him about the voice, he got quiet. Then he said, "Your house is on the old quarry line, right? Back before they filled it in, there was a cave system that ran under there. Kids used to dare each other to go down. Some didn't come back." I asked if he was serious. He nodded. He said, "Sometimes the ground remembers voices." That's all he said. I laughed it off at the time. But the next night the voice didn't just call my name. It whispered, "I can see you." And when I checked the recording later, there was a faint knock, like someone tapping on wood, directly under the couch where I'd been sitting. I never slept in that living room again. Eventually I moved out, found my own place across town, a second-floor apartment with no basement at all. But every now and then, when I wake up at 2 a.m., I swear I hear it again, faint and patient, as if it followed me. My name, stretched too far, waiting for me to answer.
Here's a story I almost never tell, because even when I think back on it, it feels like the memory itself wants to slip away. Like the road I drove on that night never wanted to be remembered. I was 19, driving home from a late shift at a diner just outside a small town in Ohio. It was past midnight, the kind of night where fog sits low in the fields, and every set of headlights feels like the only ones for miles. I took the same two-lane highway every night, a straight shot past farmland and into the neighborhood where I lived with my mom. But that night, I saw something I'd never noticed before. A narrow road veering off to the right. Its sign so weather-worn I couldn't read the name. For reasons I still don't understand, I turned. The asphalt was cracked, weeds pushing through like fingers. My headlights cut a pale tunnel through the fog. At first, it felt normal enough. Just a back road, maybe forgotten, maybe used by farmers. But after a few minutes, I realized I hadn't passed a single mailbox. No houses, no barns, just endless trees pressing closer and closer until branches leaned overhead, until it felt like I was driving into a tunnel made of wood and shadow. The road narrowed, but it never ended. My radio cut out, first with static, then silence. When I checked my phone, there was no signal. I told myself to turn around, but the road was too narrow to U-turn, and the trees pressed so close I couldn't see a safe spot to pull off. So I kept going, telling myself it had to lead somewhere. After maybe 10 minutes, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The same bent road sign appeared on the side of the road, the same tilt, the same bullet hole in the metal. I thought I was looping somehow, but I hadn't turned once. I kept driving. 5 minutes later, I saw it again, the exact same sign. That's when I slowed down. My headlights skimmed over the trees, and for the first time, I realized they didn't look right. Their trunks were too thin, too many, packed tight like bars, and in between them, in the fog, I thought I saw movement. Just faint shapes pacing alongside the car, keeping speed without making a sound. I gripped the wheel harder and pressed the gas, but the shapes kept up. They never got closer, never fell behind, just stayed with me, like they were hurting me deeper. The road began to curve, subtle at first, then sharper, like it was spiraling inward. My gas gauge ticked down faster than it should have, like the car itself was burning fuel quicker just by being there. Then, far ahead, I saw a light. Relief hit me so hard I nearly laughed. It looked like a street light, a yellow glow through the trees. I sped toward it, the shapes in the fog falling back as if they knew what was ahead. But when I reached the light, it wasn't a street light at all. It was my diner. The same cracked parking lot, the same neon sign half burned out. My hands went cold. I had left that place over an hour ago. I pulled into the lot, heart racing, and looked through the windows. Inside, the booths were empty. The counter was dark. But as my headlights swept across the glass, I saw myself, sitting in the booth by the window, head down, not moving. I slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching on the cracked asphalt. The diner vanished into fog as soon as I backed away. I floored it, the road winding tighter, the shapes pacing me again. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. For a second, I thought I had signal again. I pulled it out, and the screen lit up. It showed my own number calling me. I stared at it until it went dark again. The voice that came through wasn't over the phone. It came from the back seat. A low voice, stretched like someone speaking underwater. "You shouldn't be here." I didn't look. I couldn't. I just pressed the gas harder, praying the road would end. And then, without warning, it did. My headlights cut across the familiar highway, the same one I'd taken every night home. I burst onto it like breaking the surface of water, lungs burning. Behind me, the narrow road was gone, just trees and fog, nothing else. I pulled over at the first gas station I saw, hands shaking so badly I couldn't fit the nozzle into the tank. The clerk asked if I was okay. I must have looked pale. I told him I'd taken a wrong turn. He laughed and said there weren't any side roads between the diner and town, just straight highway. I didn't argue. I drove that stretch every night for another year until I moved away, and I never saw that road again. Sometimes I dream about it though, the trees leaning in, the shapes pacing me, the diner waiting at the end with my own reflection inside. I always wake up before I see what it does when it finally looks up.